third chapter.
Well, I so appreciated his map.
Yes.
It began. I mean, okay, so all anybody who has had any sort of Old Testament study learns about these two sources, and there he puts it in a little footnote. I just think that's that in case you're following along at home, tradition one is typically called J and tradition two P. We don't need to get into all of that right now. Just
No.
I just love that about him. But his map just makes all the sense of it. Uh, why didn't I have this 30 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I found that chart really hard to figure out. I finally, I
Kind of.
finally wrote on it like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the way it appears, but I just was going back and forth. This was really kind of mind spinning. And
Yeah.
I guess I didn't realize that there was the two feasts, the Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread.
But yeah, I didn't realize those were
And
different.
and he mentions it in his introduction on page 73. The
Mm-hmm.
year the yearly Passover is meant to be a fast, lasting reminder of the 10th plague, just as the Feast of the Unleavened Bread is to be a reminder of Israel's hasty departure.
Mm-hmm.
So once I read that, and then at the end, he says some people, like in Deuteronomy, they
73, I can't find it.
sometimes they're combined into one event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In 73, it was in the introduction in the italics. So that helped me understand it a little bit better. So Jewish people have two feasts.
Yeah, but it's really rolled into one.
Okay.
I mean, they're all celebrated in the Seder on the first
Oh.
night of what is
Oh,
called Passover.
Oh, they are. They are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, okay. I think Jane Korsberg wanted to jump in, and then we
Yeah,
can.
I was just going to say that the chart on 77 to me felt like being in a conversation where two people are speaking and one
Yeah.
overlaps the other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's exactly. I mean, I think that's exactly the way Exodus feels.
Mhm.
Is that there's two people talking, and one
Right.
says this, and one says that, and one says, and it just yeah. So
And
there you go. Yeah. So that's why that map was so helpful to me, because it showed me visually how that worked.
Mhm.
And then when I went and read it in Exodus, the NRSVUE has in this particular case headings that are very helpful, so that I could, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can just follow this along here now. It looks, I can, I can see what these different stories, where they are and what they're doing here. So, yeah, that I found to be very helpful, and very helpful to know that
Bruce?
this is the way it is in Exodus. And then we have similar stories in in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. Is it Leviticus?
Number.
Numbers. So to be confused is just fine.
Yay.
Yeah. And if Sharon says that practically speaking, most Jews celebrate them all together, well, then there you go. No.
Well, I was trying to see if I could find my Haggadah, which is the prayer book for the Passover feast,
Yeah.
the Seder. but I can't. I'm sure it's here someplace. I
Yeah.
did find my copy of Traveling Mercies, which, now it's too late after I borrowed it from the library, but whatever.
That's the way that goes.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, I mean, and the passages are all together. All of the at the Seder, all of the plagues are remembered,
Mm.
and you actually, I think it's maybe an Ashkenazi tradition. I don't know. There are differences in traditions between Ashkenazi and Sephardic, and my family's Ashkenazi. You dip your finger in the cup of wine for each plague, and it's like a drop of blood almost on your plate to remember that. And there's a lamb shank on your Seder plate to remember that what they called the unblemished lamb in the Haggadah we always used. And then remembering the flight from Egypt, the hasty departure, the matzah, and it's traditional to sit in a very relaxed manner with pillows around you, because you get to do that now and you didn't get to do that then.
Uh,
Lovely.
Very thoughtful.
Mhm.
And it takes forever, Jane. And when you're a kid, all you can think of is, when do we get to eat?
When do we get done?
Yeah.
but then when you're an adult, you know that story inside and out.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's part of that. I mean, that is the purpose for that oral tradition, that oral telling of the story, is so that you'd never forget. Yeah.
Which is, even though historically there seems to be no way to prove that this ever happened.
Mhm.
I always remember a friend of mine who was a deacon at St. Francis House. And on Pentecost, he said, "You know how we know this story is true? Because we've been telling it for 2,000 years."
Exactly. And I think that's, yeah. I mean, when you say that, the story is true because it's in the very fiber of our being. That's what makes it true. Yeah, and it does. They describe in some way. Maybe they ascribe our lives. I mean, I think that's the story of resurrection as I feel it. Do I understand it? Well, I don't. Heck, if I understand it, but I feel it. I know it is true because it is part of my very being. And I also observe the story in the natural world around me, which also for me is part of how I know it's true. And I think that unfortunately, there are so many that miss that somehow they come to believe that true means it has to be proven or it's factual.
Boy, do I understand that. Think of that for my cousins, and like you said, Kathy, you see it around you, and I look at what they see, and my one cousin goes diving all over the world, and I think there's this beauty, this resurrection. Can you see it? Of course, I haven't ever had the nerve to say that, but well,
Yeah.
he's rather arrogant. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, even the snow coming today, we say, well, there it is.
There it is.
It's helping the earth that's going to get ready for the growth.
That's right. Right. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's resurrection. When you get green things growing out from under that. those piles of white snow.
Or brown.
Saying
Or
thank you
brown.
for the water in the snow that we need so
Yeah,
badly.
exactly.
Yes, yes, God providing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
So,
glad you brought this up, Kathy, because as I read this chapter, I was kind of like, okay, kind
Yeah.
of getting in the weeds a little bit here.
but yeah, I mean, you have to get in the weeds
Yes, you do.
to read this. But again, the thing that I so appreciate about him is his guiding us through these weeds, because I have so many times just got caught in them and thrown up my hands. So it's nice to have a guide helping me make my way through the weeds so that I can in fact get out on the other side and see some sense in it, right? Or at least to appreciate the story that Sharon has described to us. I've had very little experience with a proper Seder. I have been to a Seder at the temple downtown Minneapolis when I was a younger Christian education person. But yeah, so it is not our experience, and therefore we don't really quite understand the whole thing.
It seems to me Father Bob Brown,
Yeah, and that was wrong, Jane. It's not right to have a Seder in a Christian church.
And it was as much like a real Seder as I am like Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is my Jewish Christian pastor friend, Brad, I asked him about that.
But your Jewish
said-
Christian friend, Pastor Pat, is doing it.
Yes, yes.
There's a difference there.
He's ethnically Jewish.
There's a little bit of a difference there. The setting might not be appropriate, but it's like Sharon guiding us through something to teach us about what it is.
And that was the idea.
That's very different than, a Christian church putting on a Seder.
Yeah.
Okay, Avis needed to talk and we jumped in there.
Oh,
I thought it was done to explain things, not just
Well,
fake.
it's still, anyway, go ahead, Avis.
I'm trying to think what I was going to say.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
My husband's kind of moving around and making some sounds as human beings do.
Yeah.
So I'm muting it off and on so as not to distract us from that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, Jane, what might have been more appropriate was for the pastor of the church to invite a Jewish teacher into the congregation to teach about a Seder. I mean, that sometimes can work well.
Right. And that was
thing
not that
instead of-
Jews for Jesus lady, nice as she was. She did not get it right. I mean, I came to two of them and sat there saying, no, that's not how it goes. No, that's not how it goes. No, we're not getting this part right. Mark Waldo and I at St. Patrick's one time wrote a Seder that actually followed the Haggadah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mark would insert ways that Christians had taken that tradition to mean whatever, depending on what it was.
That would be interesting.
And I can't find it, and Mark doesn't have it either because I asked him once. And the first year we did it, we got something wrong, and I was not the only Jewish convert in that parish, and so one of the other people said, this is no Seder. You got to do this. And so we changed it. And And the next year, really, it was a Seder with commentary.
Mhm.
And I think that's probably okay.
I
But-
hate to say this, folks, but I have to get going, so I don't
Okay.
know. Are we skipping next week? Did I hear that?
I think, yeah, I think so. I
That would
think-
work.
Okay.
I think, yeah, we'll skip
All right.
next week.
I love you all. See you later, Jane.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I do, I so, again, I'm going to say this again. I do so appreciate Peter Enns spelling this out for me, so that I can follow this story. And I have so appreciated the opportunities that I have had to go to a Jewish Seder and, really, I mean, that's really to observe. I think is the better way for me to. I mean, you sit at a table and do, but it's still really very much observation rather than participation, because it's just not ours. It's. I mean, I know this is really, really harsh, but it is similar to a Jewish congregation saying, okay, let's try a Holy Communion, and see what that might be about. I mean, Sharon, is that too much of a unfair comparison, or?
Yeah, I don't know. It really is cultural and religious appropriation
Yeah,
to do
Right.
a Seder.
Right.
right. Well, and I mean, it's very similar to, picking up Native American ceremonies and doing them in a white church.
Mm.
You just don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it used to be that, you would, in school or in library programs, you would make totem poles.
No, no.
That's like saying, let's make a crucifix as a decoration and take it home.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am thankful. I mean, one of the adages of my life has always been, once you know better, you do better. And that's, I mean, I think that's what these things are all about, is that we know better than to appropriate culture. And so we can step forward and do better now.
But we've taken the Passover and made it part of our liturgy. I looked up the words for the Easter Vigil, and it says, on this most holy night in which our Lord Jesus Christ passed over from death to life, the church invites her members to gather in vigil and prayer, for this is the Passover of our Lord, in which by hearing his word and celebrating his sacraments, we share in his victory over death. And I think in the regular Eucharist, there's something at the end about this is the Passover of our Lord, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't think where it was.
Yeah.
Christ, our
And it-
Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore,
Let us keep the feast. Yeah. Avis?
The Paschal lamb is the Passover lamb.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and we use that language a lot. I was going to say, I've been to a couple of Seders. One was at a friend's house with their family, and I kind of had to like wheedle and ask a bunch of times, but I was really glad I went. It was great. And then the other time I had a conservadox friend who wanted to hold a Passover, but didn't really have a good place. So we held it in my apartment. So in some sense, I was the hostess, but he invited all the guests and he bought all the groceries and he did all the cooking. And honestly, I was just there, providing a table and stuff. And both of them were really rich experiences. And in both cases, the people present were quick to tell me that Jesus is not the Passover lamb. That's a total right back. That they didn't really appreciate that metaphor at all.
So I think there's something a little bit to that. What did you call that? A right back?
Yeah.
That's a fascinating way to use that language because that's exactly what it is. A right back. I mean, anytime we we do it with Isaiah all the time. Anytime when we attribute Jesus in those places, that's a right back. That's a really good way of saying that. And we do. I mean, we do. We appropriate that language.
Interestingly, that when you mention Isaiah, in a sermon last Sunday or the Sunday before, I forget, the last Sunday, I think, TJ talks often about Jesus having been here always,
Mhm.
which is, I don't know, pretty Trinitarian, I think. And that's how Jesus is part of the Old Testament prophets. Not that they were prophesying about him. That's not what they were saying. But that in God is also Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, I think, to think about it. I think he should also say the Holy Spirit if he's going to make that analogy.
Make it and to differentiate also between Jesus with God, incarnate,
Right.
Which is, but that I mean, yeah, of course, we say that all the time. The Logos is always is always right. That so yeah.
In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's the beginning of John.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So that's true. Catherine, were you?
Well, and we say something about the feast prepared for you from the foundations of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do have that in our psyche. That Trinity is from the dawn of time, or however we even begin to think about beginnings,
Mm-hmm.
which we have trouble thinking about, and endings. And God is always, whether or not this earth is here. Yeah, and Jesus. Therefore, I mean, that's what we believe, that divine being, that Trinity is as God is always.
And
So-
what does Paschal? Because it says, "Sanctify this new fire and grant in this Paschal feast."
Mhm. Yeah, that's the Passover. It's Paschal. It's the
Like
lamb, the lamb
Passover feast.
the lamb that is sacrificed.
So I think Paschal is an adjective that pertains to Passover.
Yeah, that's right. So
So if you wanted, go ahead.
So I think that brings us to his conversation about sacrifice, where that I do think was really fascinating as well. Okay, on page 82, or beginning at the bottom of page 81, what belongs to God belongs to God. So according to Exodus 12, 23 and 27, Passover refers to God passing over, sparing the Israelite households that have the blood of the lamb sprinkled on their doors. That alone will spare Israel's firstborn. Then we have to think about that. So the blood of the sacrificed lamb plays some sort of necessary protective role in keeping the Lord or the destroyer from killing the firstborn. But if the 10th plague is God's payback for Pharaoh's treachery, why would the Israelite firstborn ever be in danger to begin with? Why do they need the blood of the lamb to keep God from killing the firstborn of Israel? Why wouldn't Yahweh continue to distinguish between the Israelites and the Egyptians like he had, and choose not to attack his own people? So we learn about the firstborn and the sacrifice of the firstborn. So in the next paragraph, the firstborn of all wombs, including Israelites, belong to God, which means they are to be sacrificed as an offering to God. God actually requires of Israel the firstborn of their livestock and flocks, as well as the first fruit of the harvest. We don't have any trouble talking about the first fruit of the harvest. We can talk about that all the time. It's much harder for us to talk about the sacrifice of the firstborn. Okay.
I'm a firstborn. I don't want to be sacrificed.
Yeah. So
Yeah, you're a girl. It wouldn't have happened to you
No.
anyway.
donkeys are exempt. And then, of course, his little footnote there to make us laugh, probably because of their value as beasts of burden and may be redeemed. Listen to this language here. May be redeemed or replaced by the sacrifice of a sheep. This is the through line, right? That brings us to all the language we have about Jesus.
Being the
Oh,
lamb.
That's
Being the lamb, right?
right. This is the through line right here. A substitute can be offered. That's where that substitutionary language comes from, the sacrifice of the lamb. Therein lies that through line. Now it's not that clean. It's not a really clean line, because we have all sorts of other theories about crucifixion. We talk about substitutionary, we talk about atonement, we talk about, these other things, but this is one of these through lines right there. So let's
I
think.
didn't get that at all. So that's where substitutionary atonement comes from.
That's where that imagery comes from. So we do have that, what you called it, Eve, the right back, right? Is that what that is then?
Could you define that term better? I'm not really familiar with it.
Right.
Right back.
Avis.
I've never heard it either.
Yeah, not me neither,
Oh.
but it's a good one.
Okay. Oh, I guess I didn't realize it wasn't a regular word. To me, a right back is where you take something old that's already been written down or that's understood, and you insert meaning into it, and you sort of impute it backwards as if that meaning had always been there when it isn't now. Like when we talk about the how gloriously wise and noble our founding fathers were,
That's a right.
that's a right back, because in reality, some of them were philanderers. They were not very diverse. They were slave owners. You know what I mean? So painting our founding fathers as mythologically fabulous is a right back.
Okay.
How do you
Like
spell right
it's
back?
like rewriting history.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
How do you spell
Yeah.
it?
WRITE, and then the second word BACK.
Thank you.
Right back.
Yeah. No, I've not heard that term, but it describes exactly what, I mean,
Yeah.
it's so very helpful to have now in my lexicon so that I can be able to say some of those things when I haven't had the words to do so.
Well, it's not very useful in your lexicon if other people don't know it too,
Well, but I can help describe it now the way
Now
you
we
did, so
all
that's
do.
good. That's a good one though.
I'm
Okay.
gonna look.
I think so. The whole idea of sacrifice here is then, I mean, I think Enns does a great job helping us, I think, to understand when substitution can happen and why and all of those things. So, of course, Enns goes on and says, we can all breathe a sigh of relief that God accepts substitutes for human firstborn. Elsewhere, we read that God accepts the tribe of Levi as a kind of substitute firstborn child in Numbers. The idea being that Levites' life, that the Levites is the priestly tribe, is a sacrifice of service to God. The firstborn of Israel still belong to God, even if God chooses not to act upon that right, literally.
And still there's a ceremony always done by Orthodox, I think probably always done by conservatives as well, and sort of done by Reformed Jews and Reconstructionist Jews, to redeem the firstborn son.
So what does that mean?
That you sell that child to a Levite, to a Kohen, the priestly caste,
All right.
for money. You give money in exchange for that child's life, that boy's life.
So in practicality, that means that the firstborn boy of a family needs to be a priest, needs to be a Levite priest. That firstborn should be handed.
If you are from the priest, if the mother is from the priestly caste, then you don't have to sell the child.
Okay.
But otherwise, you do. And it has to be natural birth. It has to be that the womb released to that child.
Gotcha. So since this family isn't, the firstborn isn't going to be that, they pay off. they make their donation to that, and that continues to happen.
Wasn't
Oh yeah. I was only, well, I'm not sure I remember my first cousins because I was only 8, but I've been to these ceremonies.
Okay.
I was thinking, and this might be, growing up Lutheran mythology, that if you were Catholic, your first son had to become a priest.
I've heard that too.
I mean, there's in Celtic mythology, there's the whole, I don't think it was the first son. It was, the seventh son of the seventh son is the one who is the magician.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's the first son, because the first son is the inheritor.
This is true.
So it might, in some places it's not the first son who has to be the priest, because the first son's the inheritor.
Right.
But maybe the second or something like that.
Interestingly, as a reader of way too much Edwardian romance, the first son always inherits the title. The second son goes into the military, and the third son becomes clergy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. And it also features strongly in Southern novels about Southern history.
Yeah.
And
the fourth son just is lost.
Yeah.
He's always the ne'er-do-well.
Yeah. Has to make his own way in life. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Well,
he had to marry for money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Traditions.
Pardon me, Jane?
Crazy traditions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, exactly. Well, and so I mean, do we I wonder, you know, this story of the Exodus and the things in it are they are essential, I think, essential to our understanding of who we are as a people as well. I think that plays out a little differently in our Christian communities than it does in a Jewish community. But you know me, and many of you have heard me lament over and over again that we just don't know these stories, and how important it is for us to understand where we fit. And how we understand Jesus. I mean, we have to know these stories to understand where Jesus is in it, and therefore where we are in it. And I can't ever say to you that I get it all completely, because I don't. And again, every single time I read this, I hear it differently. And then when I have somebody like Peter Enns kind of pointing out some things to me, it's like, oh my gosh, here I am this old and I never knew that. But yeah, it's lovely. Jane?
I'm going back to that, to page 81, where Enns has kind of a Selah moment where he says, think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the scriptures read that Moses was great and that many people followed him. And of course, I've always thought of that in terms of, well, sure, he was the leader of the Hebrews, but certainly in a multicultural situation, there were Arabs and non-Hebrew people who probably thought he's an amazing leader. You know, as I sometimes have my silos in the stories.
Yeah.
Where are you, Jane?
Just his question about this really does where he says think about that, and I was thinking actually not about that question.
Jane is giving us insight into her brain as she's thinking. That's what's happening here.
Exactly. So, you know, I mean, they thought he was a great person. There's another part that talks about when the people left, their non-Jewish neighbors lent them, or that they borrowed from as they were leaving, right? So they had the favor of their Arab neighbors who were they saying, yes, take this, get out of here, please. I mean, and then I think about the Israeli-Palestinian thing today, where you can kind of see echoes of this all in current events, I think. I don't know. You're right. You're just inside my brain. Just forget everything.
No. I mean, I think one of the things that did all of a sudden make sense to me is that these plagues, I mean, one of the reasons that I think the Egyptians wanted the Hebrews to get out of there and take stuff and go is because these plagues are being visited upon them. The
Exactly.
Egyptians. Get out of here, people. We don't want to have, we don't want this on us.
Take our necklaces, take this stuff with you. Just go.
Go. Get out of here. And then here I am again, this many years old, and either being reminded of or not having remembered that it was all that stuff that they made the golden calf out of.
Yeah.
But also the tabernacle.
And also that's a piece I did not know.
Me either.
Huh.
That was completely new information to me.
That was new to me too. And I was just thinking, like, isn't that reality that we take the gold in our lives and we use it for both building the golden calf and the tabernacle. That the good and evil are
Exists
mixed
like
in
that. Yeah.
together.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
And don't you
Exactly.
always wonder, I mean, I always wonder this, does God really care how we embellish these things that we say God lives in?
Yeah.
Does he want a gold carrying case?
Yeah.
Or would he be happy with carved wood?
Mhm.
You know, I don't,
I think this is the same question that we could ask of the altar guild, who spends all that time polishing the silver.
Yes.
And for me, I come from a low church background, conservative Christian, and we were very not fancy. And when I discovered liturgy and stuff, when I I think the two things that led me to the Episcopal Church eventually were discovering social justice, and how it connected with the gospel, and also discovering liturgy and how beautiful it was. And so I got involved in Altar Guild because I thought it was a beautiful way of wordlessly expressing devotion to God. When my thoughts were all scrambled, I could still polish the silverware. And I suppose the golden carrying case is different when there's poor people who need food and you could sell the gold. I mean, polishing the silverware doesn't take anything from a poor person, the way gold does. But anyway, that's just sort of my initial reaction. And Jesus, when he was towards the end, he was anointed with expensive oils, and people said, "Oh, you could sell that and give to the poor." And Jesus said, well, I don't know, the poor you will always have with you, which sounds pretty callous. I've never, but anyway, there was room for
Mhm.
excess
Yeah.
in
Right.
worshiping God.
She has done this to anoint me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, Avis, that, that whole idea about there is room for excess in worshiping God, I think that's quite poignant in that, there is room for excess. There is room for us to be exuberant. There is room for, I mean, so we often joke about ourselves as Episcopalians and Lutherans as being, quite
Stoic?
stoic, quite contained, quite,
God's frozen chosen.
I wasn't going to say that, but that, that's exactly. And I personally think that that's such a great phrase. There is room for excess. There is room for exuberance. And
Exuberance.
do we, does that necessarily need to be, more gold? No, but it could very well be more, faithfulness, and that's not right, the word. That's not the word I want, faithfulness. More intention, more presence, more, that kind of stuff. Jane Syme?
I often wonder about two things. One is, don't make an image of anything in this world that so that you might not be worshiping that.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is, thou shalt have no other gods before me, and there you stand worshiping this box or this tabernacle or this monstrance. No, I don't think we should
With
be
a
doing that.
cracker in it.
With a cracker in it. The monstrance with the cracker in it. Oh, come on, Sharon. Boy, oh boy.
Well,
And I often
or
think
you,
that-
oh, I'm sorry, Jane.
I often think we should not be doing that. Go on. I'm done.
Or
Well-
we could look at it as Nadia Bolz-Weber said last week, that there is room for rejoicing even in dark times.
Well, yeah. and well placed rejoicing, rather than misplaced worship,
Yeah.
misplaced idol worship. I mean, I struggle with all of that on Ash Wednesday, and I think that's the intent. I mean, for me, falling down on my knees and asking for forgiveness and sort of making an intention to have that be something I do for the next 40 days is an important part of my personal Lenten journey. And at the same, and to go, and I mean, I had to move mountains to get myself over to church on Wednesday because I don't have a car and it's not, I'm visiting and all of these kinds of things, but it's incredibly important. And getting those ashes on my forehead is incredibly important. And I listen to the scripture that says, don't be, lock yourself in a room and don't be, all of that sort of scripture that for me is this huge disconnect. I mean, it's not disconnect, a huge, I don't know what word am I looking for there?
I got a phone call.
Paradox, a huge paradox, maybe. And that one that I don't get. And I think
You mean
that's
the gospel, Matthew's gospel that we read?
Yeah, Matthew's gospel that we read. It's a paradox for me.
Susan Miller and I, when we went to the same church, we would always not eat before Ash Wednesday service and then go out to lunch together or go to one another's house.
Right.
And if we went out to eat, we always stood at the back of the church and had this long discussion about whether we should wipe off the ashes or not.
When you go to eat, right? Well, I mean, for me, it's the same thing on Fish Fridays, right? I mean, that meal, especially when I was living in Wisconsin, this huge fried fish meal every single Friday. I mean, it's not just during Lent, but is that really what we're called to do when we're supposed to not be eating meat?
Do we have shrimp?
That's right. So I can't be going out and ordering this big beautiful salmon on my Friday. Anyway, there is paradox there that I think goes to the heart of what does appropriate worship look like, and what is my intention, and how is that appropriately placed in a time of repentance and forgiveness and self introspection, that sort of stuff.
I find good the Wednesdays and Fridays you are not supposed to eat meat, which is meat, but it's not considered meat with eggs and shellfish or regular fish. Your body has to have complete amino acids to use up the rest of the stuff that you take into it. And the fish, eggs, and milk are products that you can consume that will give you all 5 amino acids. Therefore, that's why I eat fish. I eat fish every day. And if you don't have some complete amino acids, no matter what you eat, it isn't going to go to your good health.
Well, and none of us have to do any of this, right? None of us are obligated. Not eating meat on Fridays is my own choice.
Right.
And it has been that way forever for me. And it harkens as much to remembering my mom making tuna salad on Friday nights as it does to, some sort of spiritual discipline. You know, that's, I guess neither here nor there. Other than for me, there is always a paradox. And I think that that's the paradox is the very thing that causes me to continue to think about these things and continue to think about what it is I want to accomplish in Lent. So there you go. That's all I want. That's all I want to say there.
So, and this is supposed to, I think, lead us to more introspection about the wilderness.
Mhm.
So TJ put out this letter talking about people who might want to keep a holy Lent, and one of the things in it was not eating flesh meat on Wednesdays and Fridays. So I am sort of organizing the soup suppers.
Mm.
And so rather than being introspective about the wilderness, I am now consumed with thinking about what kind of soup I can make that he'll eat and other people who are keeping this because we meet on Wednesday evenings.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah. There you go.
It has no religious meaning for me at all
Right.
now.
Yeah.
A
It's
nice
really
bisque.
a nice what bisque?
Tomato bisque.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. So anyway, I kind of got us off track there, but I just
It's 10
food.
bells.
That does go back to
Just
what
10 bells.
Exodus is about.
Uh-huh.
It's about remembering God's interaction on our behalf.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I think it is. It's all about remembering. It's all about remembering this story. It's all remembering the journeys in the journey in the wilderness, and then it is the sort of proactiveness of intention that contributes to our own place on that wilderness journey. So I don't know. I can't answer anything about soup. I just know that. Yeah.
You're the
Adios.
soup on that one.
Exactly.
I am. Well,
Okay.
yeah, especially because so many soups that don't have meat in them have tons of dairy.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I can't eat that.
No, I can't either. So you lose all the way around there. Okay, so we are on, what is today, the 7th?
7.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will not meet on the 14th. And then we will meet on the 21st. So let's look at, we got chapter 9. Just wondering, that one looks pretty, I don't know. Do you want to try and attempt 2, or should we just go with chapter 9 in our?
We do enough talking about each chapter.
We do tend to do so.
Yeah.
So we got Exodus 13 through 15, and that's the actual wandering, finally leaving Egypt.
Right. And then 10 and 11 especially, seem to be longer.
Oh, fine.
So why don't we just do 9?
Okay, well, just do 9, and that'll be on the 14th.
But I will.
Yep. The
21st,
21st.
and I won't.
Thank
be
you.
there. That's the day we close on the house. So.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
But prayers
Okay.
appreciated.
Yeah, definitely.
Happy
Okay.
travel.
Sounds good. Okay, guys.
Uh-huh.
Have fun in the snow. We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have fun in the sun.